Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Islam in Life with me, Reza Ghazim. When we caution against materialism, are we not in danger of stifling development? Is that not harking back to a nomadic or even caveman-like existence? Or is this a too simplistic polarization of a complex set of ideas?
Allah says in the Holy Quran, "Say, if your fathers and your sons and your brethren and your spouses and your kinsfolk and property which you have acquired, and the slackness of trade which you fear, and dwellings which you like, are dearer to you than Allah and His Apostle, and striving in His way, then wait till Allah makes manifest His will, and Allah does not grace iniquitous folk with His guidance." This verse clearly warns against forming attachment to worldly possessions, which is what materialism is. Prosperity is encouraged in Islam, but attachment to material things should not distance one from his Lord. When a person is not in sync with Allah in this world, his very life loses its purpose. Today, the more the world advances in the fields of science and technology, and industrialism thrives, the more people are pushed towards materialism, needing to possess as much of the worldly goodies as they can. This is especially true in the cultures of the West. Islam is not against the welfare and well-being of Muslims, but it is against any economic rift leading to deprivation and misery of some in the society, which happens when one group of people amass wealth at the expense of others.
We're honored to be joined by our esteemed guest, Professor Tariq Ramadan, to discuss all of these issues. Welcome to the program, Professor.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam. I wanted to start off by asking that if we didn't have materialism and that desire for materialism, would we not have been scientifically backward in that sense? We wouldn't have had the advancements that we needed?
Look, yes, I think we can say this, but I would start from the very beginning with your introduction when you said we have to avoid being simplistic. Because materialism and religion, it's not about profit versus, spirituality. And materialism as a philosophy of life, it's not about profit. You have materialists rejecting the very existence of God and saying the world is the way it is, you have in philosophy, and they are at the same time very ethical. And they are against, for example, anything which has to do with profit and just not prosperity versus the principles. So when we speak about materialism, we have to distinguish between people rejecting the very existence of God and still could be very ethical in the way they deal with money, with economy. You have this in many philosophies. Even in the Marxist tradition, it was about ethics. It was about against capitalism. You can disagree, of course, about the very essence of historical materialism, for example, but at least we have to acknowledge the fact that it was ethical. Heidegger, Sartre, in the French philosopher, or Heidegger, the German philosopher, they were very ethical in the way we have to deal with the world. So we have to be very cautious with this. When we talk now about a very specific way of being materialist, which is trying to get as much as we can money, profit, and well-being, and we don't care about principles, so we don't care about, what is more important than principles is our life, our individual interest, or our social interest. This is what we are talking about. And I think on this, we have to say that the materialist philosophy saying we have to promote science, it's not one versus the other. For example, in Islam, when the Muslims were very close to their principles and the spirit of Islam, this is where they were promoting sciences and promoting philosophy and promoting knowledge. So it's when the Muslims stopped being close to Islam that they ended not promoting science and knowledge. So this is where religion and knowledge is coming together, versus sometimes what we have here is materialism pushing, and our problem is sciences without ethics. And this is the problem. Or science for the sake of money, knowledge for the sake of money, everything for the sake of profit. This is where we disagree, and we have to resist this trend.
And I want to pick up on one of the points that you made about the philosophers, the German philosopher and the French philosopher. One of the issues that we sometimes are faced with is this idea that the ethics that they actually applied was very much about a Eurocentric ethical outlook, but it didn't take into account the colonies, the slavery that perhaps existed within the systems that existed at the time. So their critique was limited in terms of understanding.
Not all of them, not all of them. For example, when you come to the French philosophers, you had in the West, and this is something that we have to acknowledge, people who were saying, you know what, I don't believe in God. I reject Christianity. I reject Judaism. Or I'm not a Muslim. And then at the same time, they were supporting the struggle of the poor, the colonized people. They were on the side of the colonized. So they were not Eurocentric. They were talking about human beings. So what is important for us as Muslims is to get this right. We don't agree on something which is essential, which is Tawheed, the oneness of God and transcendence. But we can agree on some principles. And I can tell you something which is going to surprise many of the people who are watching us, that sometimes on principles, we are closer in our struggle with people who are denying the existence of God, but they are true to their principles. While we have kings and regimes and even Muslims who are using Islam and making money out of it. So I think that we have to be very cautious. We belong to our principles, and we should not simplify, exactly as you said in introduction, the philosophy of the people. And when we are talking here about materialism, we are talking about an ideology promoting profit, promoting money, promoting even superiority of a civilization over another for the sake of power and money. So this is what we are saying now. Now we cannot accept this. And we cannot accept that in the name of profit, we are pushing sciences, whatever the result. So we end up with Nagasaki, we end up with Hiroshima, we end up with nuclear weapons, and we don't care about human beings. And we are differentiating between human beings and human beings. The global south is less valuable than the West, the white and the upper classes. This is something that we are struggling, and we have to struggle against.
Perhaps some people might respond by saying, yes, some of those things were mistakes, huge mistakes perhaps, but the point is that in order to have this advancement, going back to that point, you need to have some sort of desire for material betterment. So yes, mistakes were made, but at the same time, there's a lot of things have improved in a lot of people in terms of how they're able to do certain things and so on and so forth. So therefore, yes, mistakes are made, but don't they happen everywhere?
But this is where we, from where we are, we should challenge the Eurocentric narrative. It's when Christianity or the church stop taking over power, political power, and scientific power, meaning education, it's when this was ended that you had with the century of the Enlightenment and everything, that you had this industrialized improvement. So it was less religion that make it possible to have more progress in science. That's not the same in all our civilizations, and it's not the same with Islam. In Islam, we stopped being scientifically, intellectually creative when we started disconnecting the spirit, the energy of knowing the world, getting to a better understanding, and to promote sciences. So our history here has not to do with this. And my point is, yes, some mistakes were made. That's right. What you are saying is right on many different levels, when it comes to weapons, when it comes to all the even pharmacy and medicines, the way now it's there are inequalities in the world. Our way of looking at this is, yes, we need progress. And in Islam, what we have in the Quran, وَلَا تَنْسَ نَصِيبَكَ مِنَ الدُّنْيَا. Don't forget your share in this world. In this world, all the scholars in the Sunni and the Shia tradition are saying something which is essential. The second principle of Islam after ad-din is al-maslaha, the ethical public interest. Many scholars are translating this into public interest. I'm adding ethical. Why? Because yes, the public
interest...
Doesn't
that go without saying?
Sorry?
Doesn't that go without saying in the Islamic context?
The problem is that it could be that for the sake of keeping the people well, we forget about ethics. So, for example, we are saying, oh, you know what, we're in a state of darura, it's a necessity, so we forget a bit about ethical principles. This is happening with us. It's happening with Muslims today. It's happening in the West. It's happening in Muslim majority countries. So we have to stress. It's an ethical public interest, meaning the public interest is based on what you said. Justice is essential. Equality is essential. Freedom is essential. So we come with a vision where we don't have a problem with science, as long as science is connected to ethics and with the goals of dignity. So this means what? Our take on science, our take on materialism is always to ask, what is your intention? What do you want to achieve? Do you want to achieve your well-being, or do you want to serve humanity? If it's only you, if it's only the West, if it's only the free market, but free only for the great powers, that's not free market. This is a game. This is a joke. This is something which has nothing to do with justice.
Lots of interesting points, and some perhaps we'll be coming back to. We do like to keep this show as interactive as possible and really value your opinion. Here's what you sent us this week.
This week we asked, why does Islam caution against materialism? Sabira from Netherlands said, this is because while having wealth is not a bad thing, materialism means we are so attached to that wealth that it becomes the focus of our lives. This is detrimental for our own peace of mind. Hassan from USA said, materialism is cautioned because when one is attached to worldly possessions, he will not think about the needs of others and will become selfish. And Fatima from England said, materialism means we place too much importance to material things at the expense of our soul, our emotions, and intellect. This is not healthy.
Deeds will be countable, not things what you're doing for yourself, or what kind of clothes you're wearing, what mobile you're carrying, or what car you are driving. So that doesn't make any sense. It is just surroundings you're showing off to other people. By end of the day, if your heart is not clean and your activities are not clean, then you will end up in a wrong way after the death.
I believe that materialism is really not important, because Islam teaches us that we have to live a simple life. Not only that, material is material. You're going to leave everything behind. When you leave this world, you're going to go empty-handed. What you're going to take with you is your good deeds. That is more important than the materialism.
Well, basically, materialism is part of Islam as well. So Islam does not exclude material, but just put it in its perspective. It has a role, but it's not everything in life. That's the contradiction between Western thinking and Islamic thinking. Islamic thinking covers spiritual and materialism.
That's all the comments we have for this week. If you'd like to have your views featured in the show, be sure to follow us on Facebook or join us on Twitter.
One of the things that was being said by one of the contributors was this idea that materialism actually challenges the soul and so on. Why is there such a Islam caution against materialism? You touched on it before this clip, but could you elaborate a little bit?
It's essential, because materialism is a philosophy. Mm-hmm. It starts as a philosophy before being a world view, and then a system that could be an economic system or a political system or social dynamics, then negating or rejecting anything which has to do with transcendence. In fact, materialism is saying this life has no meaning. Who is going to give this life a meaning? You. So you are to decide for yourself what is the meaning of life. So at the end, Dostoevsky was saying something which was quite interesting, which is disputed by some of the materialistic scholars, by saying, if there is no God, so everything is possible. Why? Because the meaning of life is to come back to God, and you are going to be judged on what you did. If there is nothing after life, why should I worry about what is going to happen to me? Just make as much money as possible, just deal with my profit, and forget about the others. Some, as I said, philosophers are saying, no, that's not the way. For example, Sartre, following in the footsteps of Heidegger, was saying, in fact, you are free, there is no God, but there is a moral stance that you have to understand. Behave knowing and asking yourself, if every single human being on earth could behave the same, so what you are doing is right. So it's a humanistic and it's a non-transcendental ethics that you can't have this. Muslims are reacting to this by saying, no, for us it's essential. God is the axis of everything. It's the center of our worldview. And this lab has a meaning. So there is no way for us to disconnect any human actions from the moral question. From why are you doing this and what do you want to achieve? So this is central because we belong to Him and to Him we shall return. So the Muslims are in fact facing materialism as something which is a counter worldview when it comes to transcendence. Can we agree on some ethical values? Yes. Do we have the same understanding of life? No. And do we have to reject anything that has to come with materialism? No. But atheism and active atheism, that's where we disagree and we cannot accept that.
Within that concept of this active atheism that you were saying that is problematic, but that passive kind of, if I can say it that way, atheism that you're talking about, where the materialism, some of the principles can actually connect, by connecting with that materialistic thing, are you not in danger of losing that soul, in a sense, or the spirituality of Islam, by saying, well, they can have this as well. So if they can have it, what's special about from the Islamic perspective?
What they can have is the ethical ground, not the spirit. And this is why we have to keep the spirit. For example, we can lose the spirit even when we pray. If you pray and you pray only with your body at a specific time and your soul is not there, your mind is not there, your heart is not there, you are praying, but you are not praying. It's a prayer without praying. This is a danger as well. So when we are dealing with people of other faiths, God is saying in the Quran, Allah is saying in the Quran, وَجَعَلْنَاكُمْ شُعُوبًا وَقَبَائِلَ لِتَعْرَفُوا. We made you tribes and nations in order for you to know each other. Why and how, when I'm dealing with an atheist, my spirit is going to be revived? By being assertive as to my principles. So you need, if you want to deal with people who don't think like you need to know who you are. Because at the end, if you only deal with people who think like you, at one point you don't even think. You do things and it's becoming a habit. And spirituality is against this. Why do we fast? It's just to a rupture with our usual life. So when we deal with atheists, sometimes it's exactly the opposite. We disagree with the source, but the way they deal with the principles is reviving the spirit of Islam. So when you deal with somebody who is saying there is no God, he or she helps you to know more about your religion, to be more assertive, to come back to the source, to come back to the spirit, to come back to the soul. This is the way it should be, not to be lost with them, but to recover, to reform the self in dealing with them.
So, in a sense, part of what you're saying is that there are alliances to be made across spiritualities, different religions, and even people who don't have that spirit thing. So if that exists, why is there a sense, deep sense, that the world is becoming increasingly materialistic?
Because that's true. The driving force.
But why is it becoming that?
Because the driving force today are people who don't care. They are obsessed with money and profit. In the West, but also in Muslim majority countries, the great majority of our rulers are materialistic. They may start by Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim and end with Alhamdulillah. In between, there is a great deal of atheism, or active atheism, or hidden atheism, or at least acting and behaving as if there is no God. So we have to stop this hypocritical stance that we have when it comes to our leaders, when it comes to some philosophers, and when it comes to some intellectuals, and by saying, okay, try to be on that, clear on the principles that you are promoting when it comes to solidarity, when it comes to serving humanity. We have a saying in the hadith of the Prophet, peace be upon him, is that the best among you is the more useful to humanity. To humanity. to humanity means that look at the people around you. You can deal with somebody who is saying, you know what, I don't believe in God, and still you have to understand that he has a dignity, as a human being. وَلَقَدْ قَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ is not وَلَقَدْ قَرَّمْنَا الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. وَلَقَدْ قَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ is all the human beings have dignity. So we have to deal with this. So I would say that the world today, the driving forces are driving forces where they are denying the very existence of God. The global economy is godless. Many of the things that we see today when it comes to ideologies, it's about, you know, the way we are substituting to religions new idols. My country, my identity, my football team, my soccer. All this is the reality. So we need to understand what is the very meaning of shirk. And shirk is then when you take another god, or when you take, or you have other goals. This is where, as Muslims today in our world, facing materialism, facing this shift in worshipping new gods, this is where we have to stand. One God and the principles. We can work with you on principles, but we are clear. There is one God and we belong to him, and we will go back to him.
And materialism is something that has caused huge divides, let's say within the Muslim world even, in terms of the implementation of the materialistic wealth, how it's obtained. We can see that some Muslims are suffering in building the palaces that other people are actually going to live in, often Muslims and others. Yeah. Now, how do you tackle that social injustice, that on the one hand they're coming to build those palaces because they need the money to help their families survive back home, but at the same time you're having this difference?
Your question is essential and critical, because very often we have some Muslims and some critiques, for example, even in the West. They come and they target, or they criticize the consequences. And some are only criticizing the theoretical thing, and we have to do both. In fact, there is a very important discourse that is needed as to the overall system. In fact, is a systemic discrimination, is a systemic product that, or reality and product from ideologies or new ideologies only obsessed with profit and obsessed with our prosperity, whatever, and without considering all the human beings as equal human beings. So we need to target this. And when the people are telling you there is no ideology now, be careful, because this is an ideology promoting no ideology. We have to deal with this and being critical by coming and saying, okay, if I believe in God, how am I going to deal with the global economy? How am I going to deal with the political system? How am I going to deal with colonization? Cultural, political, intellectual colonization. Now we have people colonizing history. They are colonizing our history. They say, this is history, and it's the history of the dominant. And they want us to follow in the footsteps in the history of the dominant. This is historical colonialism. So we need to have this critique, and this is where Muslims today and Muslim intellectuals are not strong enough. Very often, living in the West, they buy the dominant narrative. And they want and they think the only way to be a free Muslim is to be a free Muslim as the West is defining freedom. That's wrong. The second level is the implementation, what is happening on the ground. So we need to have a very deep critique of the whole system, but we also need to look at what is happening, the consequences of this system, even on our Muslim majority countries, with the rulers, in the way the people are building palaces, and they as I said, they can refer to God every single sentence, but at the end, their way of life is materialistic. It's all about profit and well-being here, whatever the cost and the human cost. So this is where here we need to speak about justice, we need to speak about equal dignity, we need to speak about freedom, we need to speak about the critical resistance within our societies.
What would you say to a message to viewers that we're talking about the systems? What is the message to viewers about their individual responsibility? Are they involved in inadvertent materialism which oppresses people?
Of course, and this is why they have first to think about what they are doing, what they are eating, and the way they are living. These are the three things. How are you living with your fellow human beings? This is one. The second is what you buy. Are you part of the system? And the third is, are you serving or are you trying to be served? Do you have an added presence, an added value in your presence wherever you are? That's very simple, but this is essential. So when we want a system to be ethical, start to be ethical yourself. Start with yourself.
Very powerful message to end on. Islam is not against the welfare and well-being of Muslims. Rather, it is against any economic rift leading to deprivation and misery of some in the society, and the fact that prosperity must not be a hindrance to seeking proximity to the Almighty. It is important to Muslims that the objective is clear, even when Muslims have the best cars or the best material comforts, that they are encouraging oppression inadvertently, or their acquiring of wealth is not in conflict with their responsibilities to both the Creator and the created. That's all the time we have for today. I would like to thank Professor Tariq Ramadan for joining us, and I thank you all for watching. Until next time, goodbye.